The night the city swallowed him whole, Salvatore Sal, Duca stumbled out of the back of a stolen laundry van. Rope burns chafed his wrists, and a half-forgotten prayer clung to his lips. He hit the cracked asphalt behind Pier 46, palms down, rolling until the van's door slammed, the muffled curses of the men inside echoing down the wharf. Then, the engine roared, tires screeched, and the van vanished into a wash of sodium light and fog. He lay still for a long moment, the metallic taste of pure panic coating his mouth. The wind whipping off the Hudson stung his face. Far away, a tugboat groaned. Closer, a gull cackled like a drunken fool. Sal assessed the damage with the slow, careful deliberation of a man who'd survived a trio of bullets back in the day. Ribs were tender, ankle twisted, head buzzed like a broken neon sign. He lifted a trembling hand to the back of his skull, finding a sticky patch the size of a silver dollar. Blood, old, clotted. They'd gotten him good when he tried to bolt from that windowless room that reeked of cigarettes and bleach. He should have recognized the room for what it was. Should have recognized everything, really. The peculiar brand of Russian cigarettes, the slick sound of money being counted, the gravel and silk of Victor Klov's voice. He knew those things the way you know a song from childhood. You don't remember actually learning the damn thing, but your tongue knows every note by heart. Yet, when he tried to piece the facts together into a coherent picture, a thick fog rolled in. Names became blurry, faces shifted like sand, time slid sideways. He knew there was a sun. He knew there was a house with lemon trees on a terrace, trees that weren't supposed to grow there. He knew he was loved and feared and actively hunted. He knew that if he stopped moving, he'd die. He pushed himself up to his knees. A wave crashed inside his skull, and the wharf tilted precariously. He crouched, breathing slow and steady, waiting for his insides to settle down. Footsteps? No, just the slap of water against the pilings and the growl of a truck rumbling down the avenue. He staggered to his feet and gingerly tested his weight on the bad ankle. It held, barely. He needed to get away from the river, blend in, find. What was her name? The lemon trees, the sun. He walked. The night began to thin as he traveled east, the fog peeling back to reveal the dull orange dome that hung like a permanent fixture over Manhattan. He cut through the meatpacking district, a landscape of glass boxes and shadows of the old city, and climbed the iron bones of the High Line to cross the tracks. He came down again near 10th Avenue, drawn in by the low-slung glow of a diner sign, Lucy's. The red neon buzzed gently against the window glass, the vowel shimmering in the haze. Lucy's. At the edge of his vision, a woman's silhouette moved between tables, a soft blur of blue and white. He pressed a palm against his ribs and pushed open the door. Warmth, coffee, the mingled sense of griddle butter and syrup and something clean. Citrus, maybe, or a cheap lemon cleaner, sharp enough to clear his sinuses. The booths were vinyl, the green the color of a faded traffic light, and the counter had chrome edges someone polished religiously. Two cabbies jabbered in Spanish at the end. A woman in a blazer cried quietly over a plate of eggs, and a teenage couple slurped a strawberry milkshake through two straws, like a scene from another decade. The bell over the door announced his arrival with a bright ding that felt like it drilled straight into his skull. "Sit anywhere you like," the girl said. He knew she was a girl because of the voice. Low, warm, professional, but with an undercurrent of kindness. He could have told her a dozen things about herself based on those 3 seconds. She walked fast, but not like she was running from something. She smiled more with her eyes than her mouth. She could probably sweet-talk a refrigerator into fixing itself. He turned toward her and realized, with a jolt, that he didn't even know his own name. She was small and sturdy, all forearms and ponytail, the classic light blue uniform pressed within an inch of its life, white collar crisp, white sneakers a little scuffed. The name tag on her chest read Maya, in neat black letters. She balanced 2 plates on one arm like a seasoned magician, one a stack of pancakes crowned with butter, the other a blue bowl with fruit glowing like jewels. She set them down at table 4 and turned back to him. For a second, he felt anchored to the floor by the simple gravity of her attention. "You okay, sir?" she asked. You actually mean that? Yeah, he said. The word tasted unfamiliar on his tongue. Just coffee. Any booth you want, I'll bring it. She hesitated, her eyes flicking to the side of his head where the drying blood darkened his hair at the nape. We've got a first aid kit, too, in case you tangled with a door frame. He tried to smile and ended up with a grimace that looked like a confession. Door frame 1, him 0. Thought so. She nodded toward the corner booth by the window. That one's the softest. He slid into the booth, focusing on breathing, on keeping all the fractured pieces of himself contained within his skin. She arrived with coffee in a thick white mug, the kind that glowed around the rim where it met the light. Cream, sugar, black's fine. He reached for the cup and realized his hands were shaking. She didn't comment on it. Kitchen does a decent chicken soup if you need something warm. On me. The words landed like a warm blanket. His mouth formed a protest that wouldn't come. Thank you. No worries. She leaned in just a little, her voice now pitched for just the two of them. Name's Maya. You can level with me if you need help. This neighborhood's full of people pretending they don't. He wanted to tell her everything and absolutely nothing all at once. He settled on, I'm looking for a place, a house. He frowned, chasing the memory. There's a terrace with lemon trees. Something flickered across her face. Concern, curiosity. She didn't press. Drink your coffee. I'll be right back. She was a comet then, a blur of purposeful motion. Napkins, a glass of water, a tiny bowl of oranges for the crying woman, a joke for the cabbies, a refill at the counter. She moved like she belonged in the place, like the air got warmer when she passed through it. The bell on the door dinged twice more, and the cook shouted, Order up! And Sinatra crooned from a radio somewhere near the pie case about the city that never sleeps. The soup arrived steaming. He hadn't realized he was starving until the spoon was moving from bowl to mouth as if someone else was doing it. Maya slid a small plastic packet across the table. And a septic wipe, she said casually. You've got a bit of a thing. She gestured vaguely at the back of her own head. And I'm not going to make you go to a hospital if you don't want to. But you should clean it. He took the wipe, the sting of alcohol, a neat little lightning bolt. Thanks. How's the soup? It tastes like home, he said, surprised by the truth of it. She smiled, and it transformed her whole face. Then you've had a decent home. He swallowed. Lemon trees, a boy, a laugh like a snapped violin string. Maybe I did. When he stood an hour later, the city had subtly shifted from night into pre-dawn. The crying woman had stopped crying. The cabbies had left. The milkshake had melted into a pink puddle, and the teenagers had vanished into whatever future teenagers vanish into. He fished a wad of damp bills from his pocket and stacked them on the table, trying to count. The numbers crawled away from him like insects. Maya's hand landed gently on the money. Don't worry about it, she said. I told you. On me. I can't. You can? She said with a steel that made sense of how the refrigerator would listen to her. You can pay me back by coming in tomorrow and telling me how the lemon trees went. He looked at her and felt something shift inside him. Some tiny compass needle that had been whirling madly for hours finally catch on north. Tomorrow, breakfast rush starts at 6. I'll save you a booth. He nodded like a sacred pilgrimage had been assigned. Okay. Outside, the city's first trains rattled awake. He started walking again, following a scent he couldn't quite name, a geometry of streets that would surely resolve into the right angle if he just walked long enough. He found a bench in a pocket park between two buildings, sat down, and slept as the sky turned pink and the day changed ownership. Even the most disciplined man breaks after 3 days without sleep. By the end of the third day, Dante Duca's pupils had narrowed into pinpoints, and his jaw ached from clenching. He had turned his phone into a weapon, contacting private eyes on 3 coasts, calling in favors owed from the Pentagon to Palermo, snapping orders at lieutenants who knew better than to argue when the boss's father was missing. And the rumors all pointed to Viktor Kosov's hands being the ones that had snatched him off the sidewalk. On the 4th morning, Dante woke hunched over a war table on the 2nd floor of the Duca townhouse. A map of New York City spread so wide the corners curled. His sister's voice sliced through the room like a knife through silk. "Drink," Alessia said, slapping an espresso down on the map where Midtown should be. "And eat this or I will call Nona and tell her you've forgotten how." He blinked up at her. High cheekbones, black hair like a curtain, eyes that could either kill a man or get him to donate a wing to a hospital, depending on her mood. She wore grief like a private dress under the armor. He took the espresso and the biscotti she forced into his hand. "We hit 3 of Kossoff's drop houses," Dante said, his voice gravelly. "Empty. My men talk, but they don't know. Or they know and they like their teeth. You need sleep." "I need my father." Alessia's mouth tightened. "So do I." She set a small stack of photographs on the table. Security camera stills, timestamps stamped in cheap digital font. "We ran the full grid Midtown to Red Hook. Nothing." But she slid the last photo closer. "This one is from a West Side diner 2 nights ago. Lucy's." The camera faces the door. 2 a.m. Dead hour. "See anything?" He leaned in. His heart stuttered, then stuttered again. The image was muddy, the quality poor, but the silhouette in the corner booth had a posture he'd recognize at the edge of the world. The way Sal sat with one hand curled around a cup and the other worrying a napkin into a rope. The set of shoulders that had held Dante when he was 6 and his dog died. That had thrown a man into the East River when Dante was 21 and didn't listen. At the edge of the frame, a waitress in a blue dress leaned in, giving him a bowl. "He's alive," Dante said. The sentence cracked like ice. He felt the room reorient around it, furniture and air molecules taking orders from the words. "He's alive." "He was," Alessia said carefully, 42 hours ago. Lucy's." He tasted the word. "Where?" "Chelsea." She pointed south of their map. "Espresso stain. Corner lot. Chrome. Neon." "I called. Morning girl's name is Maya. Student. Pre-med from what the manager said. Lives in a walk-up in Alphabet City. Works the graveyard to pay tuition. A student. A waitress. A stranger pouring soup for his father at 2 a.m. Dante held the photograph as if it might sprout wings and fly away. He could feel the edges of the world sharpening. "Get the car." Alessia watched him, something weary and fond in her gaze. "Dante, what? Don't go in there like a storm." He looked up, startled. She had always seen straight through him. "I'm not." "You are. I love you, but you are. You go into rooms like you own the air and then wonder why everyone stops breathing." She pointed at the photograph with her chin. "That girl gave him soup. If she did that for free, if she kept him safe. We are guests." "We're Dukas," he said, a reflex as old as his bones. "We are guests," she repeated, softer but more dangerous. "I will haunt you if you scare her." He pocketed the photo. "I'll be the picture of charm. You don't know what that looks like." He was already at the door. At 5:45 a.m. Lucy's hummed with the particular electricity of a place that had survived 3 owners, a flood, a mouse problem, and the consolidation of a dozen delivery apps into one faceless app that tried to choke it. Maya rode the hum like a current. She rewired the anxiety of unpaid tuition into efficiency. She turned her grief small, private, and old into gentleness. She converted her fury at the city's indifference into stainless coffee pots that never ran dry. She had learned to move just so the regulars didn't notice when she slipped an extra egg onto a plate or swapped a kid's soda for milk because his teeth were already sugar glass. She had been poor long enough to understand that compassion was its own currency. The bell dinged. She looked up out of habit and stopped breathing. The man who walked in had the kind of presence that rearranged the air molecules. He wore a black suit with no tie and a black expression with no softness. His hair was cut close, his jaw carved like a Roman coin, and his stubble was the exact length that said, "I meant it." He wasn't tall so much as he was correctly scaled to the room. His eyes moved once, left to right, and in that sweep, Maya saw him catalog the exits, count the heads, assess potential threats. She smelled expensive cologne and rain. Behind him, A woman with the same eyes paused at the door, then peeled off toward the corner booth as if she'd already decided which table would be best for defense. 2 other men remained outside, shadows with earpieces. Maya's first instinct wasn't fear. It was recognition, not of the man's face. She'd have remembered that, but of the world he brought with him. The city was a stack of maps that only sometimes overlapped. She had grown up on one of the maps where men like this were bedtime stories and cautionary tales. Don't take the money that comes too easily. Don't open the door to anyone at midnight who calls you dear. Don't look twice if 2 black SUVs park across the street from the bodega at dawn. She plastered on her best smile anyway. Morning, she said as cheerfully as you can greet a thunderstorm. Sit anywhere you like. His eyes landed on her name tag for a fraction of a second. Maya, he said, like he was turning the syllables over in his mouth to test their weight. Coffee? Of course. She poured before he even sat down, instinct telling her his patience ran on a tight fuse. He took the cup like it might bite him. The woman with him chose the corner booth, slid in and took out a tablet. Her suit was charcoal gray. Her shoes were absurdly clean. She smiled at Maya with her mouth, but not her eyes. You served an older gentleman here 2 nights ago, the man said. No, please. No polite preamble. His voice was low, smooth, with that faint rasp that comes from saying too little and meaning too much. He set a photograph on the counter without looking away from her. Maya glanced down and felt her throat tighten. It was him, her doorframe fighter, older than the photo, but the photo still captured the kind hands and the way of saying thank you, as if he was placing a coin in an offering dish. Fear crawled up the back of her neck, not of the man in front of her, but of the story the picture implied. Yes, she said carefully. He came in late. He was hurt. Is he all right? The woman asked, and her voice was a shock. Genuine concern wrapped in silk and armor. He had a cut on his head. Maya folded her hands to keep from fidgeting. She had learned a long time ago that answering only the question asked isn't exactly lying. He ate. He left. Did he say where he was going? The man asked. He was looking for a house, she said, with lemon trees. The woman made a small noise. The man blinked once, slow, something raw flickering across his face so quickly Maya might have imagined it. That sounds like him, he said softly, almost to himself. Do you know him? Maya asked because the script was tired and her curiosity ached. The man looked back at the photo, then up at her. The decision he made took 1/10 of a second and an entire lifetime. He's my father. Her breath hitched. Then he's safe, she said reflexively, as if the claim alone could make it true. He should be with you. He should. The man agreed. He extended a hand across the counter, surprisingly formal. Dante. She stared at his hand a beat longer than etiquette allowed, as if expecting it to close like a trap. Then she wiped her palm against her apron and took it. Heat flared up her wrist at the contact. Ridiculous and unwanted. His palm was warm, dry, and steady. She wondered how many people had trusted that steadiness to save them, and how many had learned too late it could crush. I'm sorry, Maya said. He didn't give me a name. I tried to make him go to a hospital. He said he needed to find his house. He has trouble, Dante said delicately. Some days, the past sits better in his hands than the present, especially when he's stressed. Someone hit him, Maya said before she could talk herself out of it. Hard. He didn't want me to call anyone. He was scared. The woman stepped closer, lowering her voice. We believe he was taken. He escaped. Maya's eyes widened. Taken by who? The man and woman exchanged a look, and in it was an old argument. The woman won. Enemies, she said. A bad one. Maya looked down at the photo again. He'd had soup and asked if it tasted like home, and she told him it did, and he'd smiled at the bowl as if it had told him a joke only he understood. Everything in her rebelled at the idea of him in a room that smelled like cigarettes and bleach. He said he'd come back, she offered. For breakfast. Dante's jaw worked. Did he? No. She realized it sounded like an accusation and softened her tone. But that doesn't mean he won't. The bell dinged. The morning regulars started pushing in on a rising tide. Construction guys, a nurse, 2 dog walkers with 7 leashes braided around their wrists. Maya poured, plated, smiled, floated. Dante didn't sit. He became a column in the geography of the counter, still and unyielding. His hands wrapped around his cup as if it might tell his fortune if he held it long enough. His sister took the corner booth and started sending and receiving messages in silence, the air around her thrumming with barely contained energy. At 7:06, the door dinged again, and the air changed. Maya felt it before she saw him. People make different kinds of silence, and his was the narrowing of a funnel, the way a room concentrates when something fragile lands in the center. She turned, and there he was in the doorway. Sal's hair was combed with his fingers, his shirt from a charity bin, his hands raw from a fight with rope. He looked smaller in the morning than he had at 2 a.m., as if the daylight had scraped away some of whatever force had propelled him through the night. "Hey," Maya said softly, stepping out from behind the counter like she was approaching a bird with a broken wing. "Your booth's open." He looked at her as if he was trying to reattach a name to a face. Then relief washed over his features, and it did a beautiful thing to his mouth. "Soup." He limped toward the corner booth. As he passed the counter, Dante stood. The moment caught like flint. Sal stopped. He stared at the man who was the shape of him, 10 inches taller and 30 years younger. His eyes filled so fast Maya felt it in her chest. Dante swallowed, his throat moving once, twice. He didn't reach out. He didn't say a word. He only breathed. Papa Sal's face crumpled. He made a sound like something breaking and being repaired in the same instant. "Figlio," he whispered. And then Dante was there with his hands on his father's shoulders and his forehead against his father's. And there were tears, the kind men think they're too strong to shed, but never are. The diner went silent in that particular New York way. Asterisk, that means we're not looking. But we're absolutely looking. Asterisk, the nurse at booth 2 turned away with a hand over her mouth. The cook called an order and then lowered his voice to a whisper. Maya's eyes stung. She backed up a step to give them space and nearly collided with Alessia, who had left the booth as if she'd been pulled by a magnet. The sister reached past Maya to touch her father's cheek, and Sal pulled her close with the same hand Dante wasn't holding. They all stood there for a breath, a minute, a lifetime. When they finally sat, it was a tangle. Maya set soup in front of Sal without being asked, coffee in front of the other 2, water they didn't touch. Dante held a napkin with the absent-minded ferocity of a man who might strangle the delicate linen if it looked at him wrong. "How did you get away?" he asked quietly. Sal's brow furrowed. "Door frame?" he said, and Maya let out a surprised laugh that turned into a sob she swallowed. Dante looked at her, and she saw the edges of his mouth tilt. Not quite a smile, but not a smile either. "We need a doctor," Alessia said. "A real one, not a diner one." "Hey!" Maya objected, hand to heart. "Rude." Alessia shot her a look that contained both apology and threat in equal measure. "I'll have one meet us at the house." At the house? Lemon trees. Maya wondered if there was a real terrace, or if the trees lived only in Benadryl-induced dreams. Sal spooned soup into his mouth with reverence, as if it were a sacrament. Dante watched him eat like a man watching a bomb tick down. Maya refilled the coffee. She wasn't usually a person who fidgeted, but her fingers wouldn't stop finding work. Wipe, stack, fold. She noticed 3 things in the white noise of adrenaline. Dante didn't sweeten his coffee. Alessia stirred hers without drinking it. Sal blew carefully on each spoonful, as if he had once taught a small boy to do the same. Then the bell dinged again, and the air changed a second time. 2 men in denim jackets with clean nails and dirty eyes slid onto stools at the far end of the counter. They ordered coffee and kept their voices low. They didn't seem to care about the coffee's taste, these guys. They didn't look at the Dukas, but they didn't look away either. The taller one had a tattoo of a small black rook behind his left ear. Maya made their coffee, delivered it with her neutral smile, and then angled herself so she could see Dante's face in the reflection of the pie case as he watched them. His face was expressionless, but something inside him had unfolded a knife and clicked it into place. Alicia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, typed a quick message, and her expression didn't change at all, which Maya knew meant it had changed a lot inside. She stood up. "We should go," she said softly. "I haven't finished," S protested, his chin up, stubborn as a boy. "Bring it," Mia said, already grabbing a to-go lid. "It'll taste like home in the car." S's face lit up like a kid being let in on a secret. Dante's eyes flicked to Maya. "Thank you." She pretended not to notice. The guy with the rook tattoo lifted his cup, took a sip, and grimaced. "Coffee's burnt," he announced to the room. "Then don't drink it," Maya said sweetly. Her words were like lacquer, shiny, thin, and poisonous. He grinned. "Hey, sweetheart, you got a minute to talk? Manage your things." "I'm the manager this hour," she lied. "What's up?" "Health code stuff." He leaned in, his breath sour with peppermint, like he thought it could cancel out any other smells. "Back room." "Nope," she said cheerfully, loud enough for the cook to hear. "Right here is fine, or better yet, out there." She jutted her chin toward the door. "We do our health code in the sunshine." A muscle in his jaw twitched. He stood up and slowly placed a $5 bill on the counter, sliding it back and forth with one finger. "A service tip," he said. "Be careful who you give free soup to." Mia's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't been here 2 nights ago. Someone had told him. Her eyes darted to Dante. He didn't move, but something in the air around him did. The rook leaned closer. "You never know who might choke." Kitchen's closed. The cook barked suddenly, coming out of the kitchen with a cleaver he didn't need and a look that said he'd carved more than just brisket. "You boys can leave." The room went quiet again. The rook held Maya's gaze, decided she wasn't worth a broken glass in a crowded room, finished his burnt coffee like it was a dare, and left. His partner followed. The bell chimed, bringing time back into motion. Alicia was already paying at the register. Dante stood, the legs of his chair scraping against the tile. He put a $100 bill on the counter, and when Maya opened her mouth to refuse, he added another. "For the soup," he said, "and the health code." "Look," she began, but stopped. His expression said, "You'll insult me if you refuse this." And she didn't have the time or the energy to start a cultural war over a check. "Okay," she said, "but I'm counting it as a donation to the college fund." He asked, "Pre-med?" The corners of his mouth doing that almost smile again. "Neuro," she said, surprising herself with her honesty. "Brains are stubborn." "Tell me about it," he muttered, glancing at his father, who refused to leave without a plastic spoon. They moved quickly. A black SUV slid to the curb as if the city had grown it there. Maya stood at the door with a to-go bag, her hand on the glass, watching them gently load S into the back. S rolled down the window before they shut the door and held out the spoon like he was taking an oath. At 7:06, the door chimed, and the air changed. Maya felt it before she saw him. People make different kinds of silence. His was like the narrowing of a funnel, the way a room gets smaller when something fragile lands in the middle. She turned, and there he was in the doorway. His hair was combed with his fingers, his shirt was from a thrift store, and his hands were raw from fighting with rope. He looked smaller in the morning than he had at 2 a.m., as if the daylight had scraped away some of whatever force had pushed him through the night. "Hey," Maya said softly, stepping out from behind the counter like she was approaching a bird with a broken wing. "Your booth's open." He looked at her like he was trying to remember her name. Then relief washed over his face, and it made his mouth look beautiful. "Soup," he said. "Soup." He limped toward the corner booth. As he passed the counter, Dante stood up. The moment sparked like flint. Stopped. He stared at the man who looked like him, but 10 inches taller and 30 years younger. His eyes filled with tears so quickly that Maya felt it in her chest. Dante swallowed. His throat moved once, twice. He didn't reach out. He didn't say a word. He just breathed. "Papa." S's face crumpled. He made a sound like something breaking and being put back together at the same time. Figlio, he whispered. And then Dante was there, his hands on his father's shoulders and his forehead against his father's. And there were tears, the kind that men think they're too strong to cry, but never are. The diner went silent in that special New York way, which meant everyone was pretending not to look, but absolutely was. The nurse at booth 2 turned away, covering her mouth with her hand. The cook called out an order and then lowered his voice to a whisper. Mia's eyes stung. She took a step back to give them space and almost ran into Elysia, who had left the booth like she was being pulled by a magnet. The sister reached past Maya to touch her father's cheek, and South pulled her close with the same hand that Dante wasn't holding. They all stood there for a breath, a minute, a lifetime. When they finally sat down, it was a tangle. Maya put soup in front of S without being asked, coffee in front of the other 2, water they didn't touch. Dante held a napkin with the absent-minded intensity of a man who might strangle the delicate linen if it looked at him wrong. "How did you get away?" he asked quietly. S's brow furrowed. "Door frame?" he said, and Maya let out a surprised laugh that turned into a sob she swallowed. Dante looked at her, and she saw the corners of his mouth tilt up a little. Not quite a smile, but not a smile either. "We need a doctor," Elysia said. "A real one, not a diner one." "Hey!" Maya protested, putting a hand to her heart. "Rude." Elysia gave her a look that was half apology, half threat. "I'll have one meet us at the house." The house. Lemon trees. Maya wondered if there was a real terrace or if the trees only lived in Benadryl dreams. S spooned soup into his mouth with reverence, like it was a sacrament. Dante watched him eat like a man watching a bomb countdown. Maya refilled the coffee. She wasn't usually fidgety, but her fingers wouldn't stop finding things to do. Wipe, stack, fold. She noticed 3 things in the white noise of adrenaline. Dante didn't put sugar in his coffee. Elysia stirred hers without drinking it. S blew on each spoonful carefully, like he had once taught a little boy to do. Then the bell chimed again, and the air changed a second time. 2 men in denim jackets with clean nails and dirty eyes slid onto stools at the far end of the counter. They ordered coffee in voices that didn't care what it tasted like. They didn't look at the DeLucas, but they didn't look away either. The taller one had a tattoo of a small black rook behind his left ear. Maya made their coffee, delivered it with her neutral smile, and then angled herself so she could see Dante's face in the reflection of the pie case as he watched them. His face was expressionless, but something inside him had unfolded a knife and clicked it into place. Elysia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, typed a quick message, and her expression didn't change at all, which Maya knew meant it had changed a lot inside. She stood up. "We should go," she said softly. "I haven't finished," S protested, his chin up, stubborn as a boy. "Bring it," Maya said, already grabbing a to-go lid. "It'll taste like home in the car." S's face lit up like a kid being let in on a secret. Dante's eyes flicked to Maya. "Thank you." She pretended not to notice. The guy with the rook tattoo lifted his cup, took a sip, and grimaced. "Coffee's burnt," he announced to the room. "Then don't drink it," Maya said sweetly. Her words were like lacquer, shiny, thin, and poisonous. He grinned. "Hey, sweetheart, you got a minute to talk? Manager things." "I'm the manager this hour," she lied. "What's up?" "Health code stuff." He leaned in, his breath sour with peppermint, like he thought it could cancel out any other smells. "Back room." "Nope," she said cheerfully, loud enough for the cook to hear. "Right here is fine. Or better yet, out there." She jutted her chin toward the door. "We do our health code in the sunshine." A muscle in his jaw twitched. He stood up and slowly placed a $5 bill on the counter, sliding it back and forth with one finger. "A service tip," he said. "Be careful who you give free soup to." Maya's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't been here 2 nights ago. Someone had told him. Her eyes darted to Dante. He didn't move, but something in the air around him did. The rook leaned closer. "You never know who might choke." Kitchen's closed. The cook barked suddenly. coming out of the kitchen with a cleaver he didn't need and a look that said he'd carved more than just brisket. "You boys can leave." The room went quiet again. The Rook held Maya's gaze, decided she wasn't worth a broken glass in a crowded room, finished his burnt coffee like it was a dare, and left. His partner followed, and the bell chimed, bringing time back into motion. Elysia was already paying at the register. Dante stood, the legs of his chair scraping against the tile. He put $100 bill on the counter, and when Maya opened her mouth to refuse, he added another. "For the soup," he said, "and the health code." "You're good," he told her simply. "You too," she said, not trusting her voice to say anything more. Dante hesitated on the sidewalk. He looked even taller outside. The morning light put copper streaks in his dark hair. He slid a card across the doorframe, black raised letters, not so much a business card as a boundary marker. Duca, followed by a number. "I'll have someone watch the block," he said quietly, not as a threat, just in case. "In case of what?" she asked, even though she already knew. "Because questions have power, in case someone takes health codes too seriously." She tucked the card into her apron without looking at it. "I can take care of myself." "I don't doubt it." He paused, and in that pause lived all the things you don't say to a stranger you owe your life to. Then he said something else entirely. "Thank you for feeding my father." "He paid me in stories," she said. "You owe me nothing." He considered that, nodded like the math added up, and slid into the car. The SUV merged into the morning traffic. Maya stood in the doorway for a long time after the taillights disappeared. The card warmed against her hip, and the bell chimed, settling back into the soundscape of eggs and Sinatra and orders up. She counted the cash in the till and set aside the $200 for the emergency scholarship fund she and the cook kept in an old coffee can under the sink. Then she grabbed a clean mug, poured herself some fresh coffee, and pretended the slight tremble in her hand was from the caffeine. The Duca Terrace did, in fact, have lemon trees. They grew in terracotta pots the size of bathtubs, lining a balustrade that overlooked a patch of the West Village that still remembered poets. The smell of them, clean, astringent, a little dangerous, cut through the chemical vanilla scent of the antiseptic as Dr. Verrett checked S's pupils and pronounced the concussion mild. "The stitches aren't necessary. The rest is just a matter of calm," he said, knowing this family didn't own any calm. "Memory will return like a shy cat," Verrett said, patting S's shoulder with a hand that had been steady through 3 generations of Duca emergencies. "Approach sideways. Don't call it by name." "Can we keep him safe?" Dante asked, a man who had learned that safety is a currency with no fixed exchange rate. "You can try," Verrett said. "Don't let him wander. Keep the house quiet. No newspapers, no television, no talk of." He glanced at Elysia, then at Dante, then at the world that lived under their skin. They tried to conduct business. They failed a little. They tried again. S slept on a chaise lounge under a lemon tree and woke up startled at 3:30 a.m., insisting he had to meet Carmine at the docks. Elysia sat with him and knitted a scarf in August because the motion calmed her. Dante paced like a caged animal, giving orders to ghosts under his breath. When S asked for soup, the kitchen sent up 3 kinds, but none of them tasted like Lucy's because a diner's soup isn't just a recipe. It's a place. On the second evening, as the sky turned a tired, bruised peach color and an ambulance sang a city lullaby somewhere in the distance, Dante found himself leaning on the terrace rail, his phone cold against his palm, the card warm in his pocket. He wasn't a man who called strangers. He wasn't a man who asked for help. He had built an empire on the sacred belief that asking made you weak and offering made you dead. But his father had asked for soup, and a girl with a ponytail and a voice made of cloth napkins had given it to him, and the map had shifted. He dialed. "Lucy's Diner, this is Maya." Came the voice, higher now, buoyed by the evening rush. "It's Dante," he said, realizing he didn't have a way to identify himself that wasn't a threat from the morning. "Oh," she said, and he could hear her smile over the line. Could picture the way it must hunch one shoulder up a little, tuck the corner of her mouth in like she was keeping a secret. "Hi." "He asked for your soup." Dante said, feeling absurd. And he doesn't like any of ours. Of course he doesn't, Maya said. Like men refusing soup was a language she was fluent in. Yours probably tastes like money. He laughed before he could stop himself. Came out rusty, like something from his childhood. Can I? Would you? He stopped. Begging had a taste too iron and salt. He swallowed it. Could I buy a gallon? You can have 2, she said promptly, then caught herself. I mean, the owner will charge you because capitalism is a scam. But yes, when do you need it? Now, he said, and then softer. Please, give me 30 minutes, she said. I'll bring it. You don't have to. I know, she said gently and hung up. 32 minutes later, the bell rang downstairs, and Dante pulled open the front door to find Maya on his stoop with 2 insulated bags and a smile that made the old townhouse seem brighter. She looked smaller out of her uniform, wearing a faded denim jacket and black jeans, her hair twisted into a messy knot. Her sneakers were still somehow white. She smelled faintly of lemons and grease pencil. You live here? She asked, tilting her head back to take in the facade, the ironwork, the way the house seemed to listen. For the moment, he said, stepping aside. Come in. Do I need to sign an NDA? Do you want to? Not really. Then no. She walked into the foyer like she belonged to herself. He led her upstairs to the terrace, where S sat with a blanket on his knees and a lemon in his hand like an orb. He looked up as they came out, and a smile cracked his face. Soup girl, he said warmly. Maya, she corrected, even as her cheeks turned pink. You can call me Maya. Maya, he tried, tasting it like a lullaby. She set the bags down and started unpacking them. 2 quarts of chicken noodle, 1 lentil, 1 tomato basil, garlic bread wrapped in foil, a small container of Parmesan cheese, because dignity is Parmesan. She moved naturally in other people's space, with a borrowed grace of those who have always set tables they don't eat at. Dante watched his father watch her, seeing a softness he hadn't seen in S in months. Your trees are real, she said, delighted. As if the city had done something decent and she didn't want to scare it away. Imported from Sorrento, S said proudly, his memory apparently filing that fact under things not to lose. Smuggled like contraband. Smuggled lemons, Maya said. That feels illegal in a cute way. Nothing about us is cute, Dante muttered. She shot him a look over her shoulder, and he felt absurdly like he'd been scolded by the good part of the world. They ate. The soup did, in fact, taste like home. S made a happy noise over the chicken noodle that made Dante's throat ache. Alizia came up midway, took one look at the scene, the girl, the soup, the lemon, and arched an eyebrow so eloquently that Dante considered taking a picture. After Maya collected the bowls, ignoring their protests, she said, I'll run these back tomorrow. You can reimburse me with a parking space, because finding a spot on this block took 10 years off my life. I'll send someone to carry your car, Dante said before he could stop himself. Please don't, she said. It's a Civic. It's been through enough. The sun slid away, and the city clicked on its night jewelry. String lights over a backyard, windows blinking into constellations, sirens painting alley walls red and blue, red and blue. Maya put the empty containers back in the bag and lingered like someone who didn't want to admit she cared. Dante stood like a man on the edge of a cliff, pretending it was just a sidewalk. Thank you, he said finally, for all of it. You're welcome, she said. But I didn't do it for you. I know, he said, and felt something in him loosen. I think that's why it matters. She studied him for a second that felt like judgment and curiosity braided together. You look less scary on a terrace. You look exactly like yourself, he said, which was neither flirting nor an insult, and somehow both. Is that good? It's honest. She nodded like she'd file that somewhere she kept her gentle things. Would you? He began, then stopped. He'd been running this city since he could legally buy bourbon. He'd never once felt like he was at a loss for words. Would you come again tomorrow? For dinner. My mother wants to meet you. Your mother? She repeated. both delighted and alarmed. "She's strong," he said, which in his mouth meant dangerous. "But she's soft where it counts." "Then yes." He walked her downstairs. At the door, she paused with her hand on the knob, looking up at him. "Do you always watch people the way you watch me?" "How do I watch you?" "Like you're deciding if I'm a problem." "You are," he said honestly. "But not the kind I'm used to." She grinned. "Good." She slipped out into the night with her insulated bags and her Civic, and a piece of him he hadn't agreed to give. He stood on the stoop until her taillights turned the corner, and only then did he realize his shoulders had dropped an inch. Viktor Kosov wasn't a man to leave a favor unpaid. He'd sent 2 boys to the diner to scout things out and found a girl who smiled like a razor. He'd sent a whisper to an officer in the 7th precinct to check a license plate and learned the Civic belonged to a student with a scholarship balanced on a knife's edge. He'd sent a man to watch the block, and that man had disappeared, which told Victor that the Dukas had widened their radius. So he changed his approach. He sent flowers, not to the townhouse but to Lucy's. A dozen long-stemmed roses, the exact crimson color of arterial blood, delivered at noon on a Saturday when the line was out the door. The card read, "For the girl with the generous hands. Tell Mr. Duca to say please next time." No signature. No need. The cook stared at the roses like he wanted to chop them into pieces. Maya stared at the card until the letters blurred. Then she slid it under the register and went back to pouring coffee like nothing could shake a river. At 5 p.m. the bell rang and 2 uniformed cops came in for pie and to stand where the city could see them. At 7 p.m. Dante texted, "We're coming." At 8 p.m. the bell rang again, and the room hushed at the sight of a woman who looked like she had crossed entire oceans without getting the hem of her dress wet. Gianna Duca wore black like a uniform and pearls like they remembered her neck from another life. Her hair was silver, her eyes were like winter sunlight, and when she smiled at Maya, the whole diner seemed to exhale. "You are the girl who feeds my men," Gianna said, as if she were reporting a miracle. "I feed everybody," Maya said, her hands suddenly shy. "Some are harder to feed than others." Gianna glanced at her son, who had the decency to look briefly chastised. "I am told you saved my S." "He saved himself," Mia said. "I just heated up the soup." "Anyone can heat," Gianna said. "You warmed it." She took Maya's hands in both of hers. Her palms were soft from creams and rough from life. "You are welcome in my house." "That's a lot," Maya said, because she'd learned to meet grandeur with humor. "Thank you." They ate in the corner booth. Chicken parmesan for Gianna, who declared it almost as good as hers, which was like being knighted. A burger, rare, for Dante, and a salad for Elysia that she poked it like it had done something wrong. The roses watched from the end of the counter like a threat. Gianna asked Maya questions with the intensity of a searchlight and the ease of a grandmother. Where did she study? Hunter. What did she study? Neuroscience. What did she love about it? That the brain could save itself if you gave it a story to hold on to. Dante listened, something like wonder cracking his hard shell. He had dated models and lawyers and women whose perfume you could smell from a floor away. He had never sat in a diner under a neon sign and listened to a girl talk about synapses like they were choreography. When the check came, Gianna paid with cash and slipped an extra bill into the coffee can under the sink while pretending to wash her hands. Maya pretended not to see it, to preserve everyone's dignity. Outside, under the neon sign, Dante lingered. The neighborhood hummed. A saxophone cried from a second-floor window, a couple argued in French, and the laundromat threw light into the street like a party. He leaned against the brick wall and watched Maya tie up the garbage bag and drag it toward the curb. "You don't have to do that," he said, because useless sentences sometimes jump the fence. "Neither do you," she said. "But here we are." He took the bag from her hand. Anyway, their fingers brushed, a little shock of static electricity blooming between them. He visibly swallowed hard. She pretended she didn't even notice. "I got flowers today," she said, trying to sound nonchalant. "What kind?" "The kind that bleed." She described the card without even bothering to take it out of its envelope. He listened to every word, not interrupting once. His face didn't betray a thing, but his shoulders. They did. "I'm not stupid," she said, stating the obvious. "I know damn well who they're from." A slow, simmering fury radiated off of him like heat rising from the hood of a car after a long drive. "I'll take care of it. Don't go killing anyone over roses," she said, trying to keep it light, because the only other option was sheer terror. "It'll put you in the papers," he said matter-of-factly, and then the words just tumbled out of his mouth before any kind of logical thought could reel them back in. "I'll kill anyone I need to." She looked up at him, a mix of startled and not startled. "That's not exactly romantic." "It's not meant to be," he said, his voice low and steady. She nodded once, a short, sharp movement. "It's a fact. Facts she could file away for later." "Okay," she said, and it was like the city itself let out a long, slow exhale. The first time he kissed her, it was because she told him not to. They had sort of stumbled into a pattern, but it wasn't a plan, not exactly. She brought soup. He brought lemons. She taught S to play a memory card game using pictures of places he loved. He had the piano tuned and watched her rediscover Debussy through muscle memory she wouldn't admit she possessed. Alesia teased them both mercilessly, but then she'd conveniently leave them alone in rooms on purpose. Jana watched it all, approving with a knowing look, and made arrangements accordingly. The roses stopped arriving. The rook moved to another board, in another game. One night after the dinner rush, he stayed behind and closed the diner with her. He flipped chairs upside down on the tables, wiped down the counters, learning the whole ritual, the ketchup bottles, the sugar caddies, the almost sacred art of the crease-free napkin. Sinatra murmured softly on the radio. The neon sign outside cast a faint, otherworldly glow on the countertop. The city outside was a dark, restless sea, dotted with the lights of passing cars like bright, darting fish. He dried his hands on a towel and said, "This feels like a church." She laughed, a short, surprised sound. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about this grease trap." "I mean it." "I know." She sank onto a stool and let her shoulders slump, a gesture of intimacy he recognized as being rarer, in some ways, than nakedness. "Don't kiss me," he blurted out. He blinked. "I wasn't going to." "Yes, you were." She looked at him sideways, that familiar grin playing on her lips, the one that always told the refrigerator to behave itself. "You're thinking about it." "I am," he admitted, because he'd been taught honesty as a weapon, but he'd discovered he preferred it as a gift. "I think about it constantly." "Don't," she said, but she was smiling, which completely short-circuited every part of him that wasn't already living in a state of utter confusion. "Not because I don't want you to. I do." She said it like a clinical diagnosis. "But because once you start, you don't stop. And I have a midterm at 8 in the morning." He actually laughed. A real, honest-to-God sound that made the pie case do something magical with the light. "What's the topic?" "Hippocampal plasticity," she said. "Memory," he said, suddenly sober. "Bring it home, then." She stood up, carefully placed the towel on the counter, walked toward him with small, deliberate steps, like she was carrying something scalding hot, and rose up onto her toes to press her mouth against his. It wasn't some over-the-top cinematic moment. It was simple, controlled, fiercely soft. It was an act of mercy. He had been kissed by women who tasted like sugar and ambition. She tasted like coffee and lemon peel and the unvarnished truth. "Now go," she said, her breath warm against his ear. "Before we burn the diner down." "Yes, Dr. Maya." "Not yet," she said. "But soon." He left with his hands shaking and the map of the city under his feet completely rewritten. When Kozlov finally made his move, he didn't do it with roses. He did it with fire. A small, empty warehouse on the edge of Red Hook went up in the kind of inferno that could swallow whole blocks if the wind decided to lend a hand. The FDNY battled the blaze for 6 hours. Dante watched from a car 3 streets over, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. At dawn, a text message arrived from a number that had never existed before and would never exist again. Asterisk more where that came from. Tell your girl to keep her hands to herself. In the sudden quiet that followed, he realized something cold and hard. The girl wasn't an accident anymore. She was a lover. He went to the diner at noon with a proposal and a fear. The proposal was security. A car, a safe house she would absolutely hate. The fear was that she'd say no, and he'd be forced to choose between protecting her and respecting her. She listened, leaning back against the stainless steel counter, her arms folded. He realized he loved the elegant line of her wrists. I can't stop working, she said. Rent exists. I can pay it. I know, she said gently, and she reached out and put 2 fingers over his mouth to stop the word before it could shame them both. I won't be owned by money, not yours, not anyone's. You said. He nodded because she was absolutely right, and because he'd never had anyone stop him like that and have him not mind. Let me at least drive you there and back, and make me look like a target. You already are, he said, and watched her swallow that truth. Please, he added, a word he did not give out lightly. Humor me. She thought about it for a long beat, then sighed. Fine, but the car has to be ugly. He almost smiled. We have access to an entire museum of ugly. The next morning, Maya got out of a tan 2006 Corolla with a dented bumper, driven by a grandmother named Rosa who could bench press a full-grown man, and had, once, back in '89. Koslov's spotter across the street wrote down the license plate and reported back a ghost. The city laughed in 7 languages. That night, when the diner closed and the city hit that particular pitch where anything could happen, and you have to decide whether you're the kind of person who runs toward the danger or away from it, Dante walked her home. He did it without asking because sometimes the question itself is a danger. On her stoop, under a street light that turned moths into tiny planets, she touched his wrist and said, You are getting in deeper. He said, I was born at the bottom. She said, I meant with me. He said nothing because the word yes felt like stepping off the edge of something very high. Don't save me, she said, and then softer. Save with me. He rested his forehead against hers. The city was a blur of noise and light and the mingled smells of hot garbage and jasmine. He said, Okay. The end, when it came quickly, like good endings do, snapping tight what had been loose, closing the door the city kept opening. A tip whispered to Elysia led them to a safe house in Long Island City with a view of a bridge that made it easier to lie about being safe. Inside, 3 of Koslov's men were packing to run, and one talked because he liked his teeth in their current arrangement. A phone on the table pinged with an address and a time. The time was tomorrow. The address was Lucy's. They weren't going to burn it down. They were going to walk in during breakfast and turn it into a message. Dante went cold and then very hot and then very still. He made 2 calls, one to a cop who was not a cop, and one to a man who owed him a war from Palermo. Then he sat down on the floor of the townhouse hallway with his back against the wainscoting and his head in his hands. And he remembered his father's hand on his head when he was 6 years old and the dog died. He stood up and did what his father had taught him. Made a list and broke it down into jobs. At 5:30 a.m. The block around Lucy's became, quite incidentally, the safest block in Manhattan. Delivery trucks stalled out at the corner. A bus broke down right in front of the fire hydrant. Cab got a flat tire. 2 old men played chess very slowly on the sidewalk, right where the rook would need to pass. Inside the diner, Maya poured coffee for the regulars she had texted at 3 a.m., asking them to come in early. Asterisk please. First cup on me. Asterisk they came because they loved her, and because the city works when people say yes to each other. At 6:02 a.m., 3 men in clean denim with dirty eyes turned the corner and ran headfirst into a city that had subtly rearranged itself. They pushed through the door. The bell above the door dinged, sounding almost like a mocking laugh. They took 3 steps and stopped dead in their tracks because there were 8 cops at the counter, and none of them were cops. The one with the rook tattoo smiled at Maya. Slow. Morning, sweetheart. She smiled back, showing her teeth. Slow. We're out of roses. Dante stepped out of the bathroom like some kind of trick of the light and stood between the men and the girl, hands empty and palms up like a man negotiating, and not like a man who had already placed snipers on 2 nearby rooftops. "You came for breakfast," he said. "Let me feed you." They didn't leave in handcuffs because handcuffs make headlines. They left in cars that were not theirs, thinking they had made choices. Sometimes violence is a straight line. Sometimes it's a field of magnets and you move one piece here and the whole board hums. Later, when the block exhaled and the bus started up again and the cab drove crookedly to the repair shop and the old men knocked over their kings, and the city returned to its regularly scheduled miracles, Maya refilled his coffee and said, "You didn't kill anyone today." He said, "Not today." She nodded, accepting a ledger that would never balance in public. "Come tonight," she said. "I want you to hear something." That evening, under the lemon trees, she set her phone on the terrace wall and played a recording. S's voice, telling a story into her phone about a boy and a dog and a summer the city forgot to be cruel. She had recorded him in the afternoons when the soft light made him seem even more vulnerable, and she played it back to him at night when the fog rolled in off the harbor. The brain could save itself if you gave it a story to hold on to. Dante listened with his eyes closed, and when the voice broke on the word Figlio, he reached for her hand like the map was finally correct and the road lay clear. Gianna watched from the kitchen door, her pearls catching the last light of dusk, and nodded to a god she negotiated with daily. Alizia leaned on the railing and texted 3 people good news she didn't name. When the story ended, the lemons breathed, and the city below them changed colors like a living thing. Dante turned to Maya, his fingers still laced with hers. "Marry me," he said, and it was ludicrous and perfect and too early and exactly on time. She laughed through her tears. "That's not how hippocampal plasticity works." "I don't know what that means." "It means yes," she said, and kissed him until the city forgot to be cruel for the length of a song. The terrace hummed with the sounds of the city, the lemon trees listened, and somewhere downtown, a tugboat moaned like a blessing. And in a little diner under a neon sign that buzzed Lucy's when it got tired, a cook turned off the radio and locked the door and set tomorrow's soup to simmer. Because some loves are fed, and some empires are undone, by a spoon.